You say no to something small, a dinner invite, a favor, a request to jump on a call. Before the sentence is even finished, you're already adding the reasoning. I can't because I have an early morning and I still have to prep for a thing, and honestly, I'm just wiped. Nobody asked for the paragraph, but you handed it over anyway. You do this in text, rewriting one line 4 times so it sounds less like a decision and more like a case you've built. You do it in meetings, adding 2 extra sentences after you've already made your point, just to make sure nobody could possibly misread you. You even do it with your own kids. Over a bedtime you already decided on, like you owe someone a defense for parenting your own child. Here's what's really happening. Over-explaining feels like protection, but it's a request for permission dressed up as information. You aren't handing someone facts because you think they need facts. You're handing someone facts because part of you doesn't believe your decision is allowed to stand on its own. So you build a case. And if the case is airtight, then nobody can push back on it, which means nobody can be disappointed in you, which means you can't be blamed for how you feel or what you chose. That's the trade you're making without realizing it. You give up the right to a simple decision, and in exchange, you get to feel like you've covered your butt. Underneath this is a subconscious belief. A decision without an external reason attached to it doesn't feel like a decision you're allowed to make. Why? Because somewhere along the way you learned that your needs weren't important. You probably won't remember exactly when that rule got written. That's how your subconscious works. It doesn't need one big, obvious moment. It just needs enough repetition, enough times an unexplained no led to a raised eyebrow, a follow-up question, or a version of, well, why not? Until your nervous system learned to skip straight to the explanation before anyone even asked for one. It isn't paranoia, it's a shortcut your body built to avoid a feeling it didn't want to have again. There's usually a second belief riding underneath the first. If you let your guard down and just state the decision without backing it up, something will fall apart. And usually that something is a loss of connection. Someone's disapproval, disappointment, pushiness. So you keep building the case even when nobody asked for it, because part of you is convinced the case is what's holding things together. Think about the last time you turned down an invitation. Did you just say, I can't make it? Or did your chest tighten a little while you immediately reached for an external reason, even a small one, even one you half made up? It shows up in meetings too. You disagree with an idea, and the disagreement itself isn't the hard part. What's hard is saying, I see it differently, and stopping there. Instead, you soften it, then justify it, then soften it again, until your original point is buried under 4 sentences of cushioning. Inside your head, a second voice kicks in almost instantly, telling you to add something, soften it more. Your shoulders creep up toward your ears, and your voice speeds up slightly on the follow-up, like you're trying to get through the justification before anyone has time to react poorly. None of that reads as a big moment from the outside. It happens in a split second, which is exactly why it's so easy to miss and so hard to interrupt. There's a reason this hits hardest with the people whose opinion genuinely matter to you. And I want to come back to that in a minute because it changes what the solution truly looks like. Here's what that looked like for a client of mine. We'll call him Michael. Michael was in his mid-40s, the sort of man people described with easy praise. So easy to work with, so dependable, the kind of person who rarely made things difficult for anyone else. So when the coordinator at his daughter's school reached out about the spring fundraiser, she didn't even hesitate to ask him to chair it again, the way he had the year before. The message showed up on his phone between meetings, and his first thought came fast, along with the tension in his body. I can't do this. Work had been relentless, family life was already full. His calendar felt like a game of Tetris where every square had already been claimed. And he knew almost immediately that taking this on would mean giving up the little breathing room he had left. The decision wasn't the hard part, saying it was. That evening he opened his messages and typed, I'm sorry, but I won't be able to chair this year. Then stared at it, sure it sounded too abrupt. So he added an explanation about work, then another about family obligations, then an offer to help behind the scenes, then an apology for responding late, even though the request itself had arrived without warning. He reread the message over and over, trimming a word here, adding a sentence there, until nearly 15 minutes had passed and a simple answer had turned into something that read more like a defense, as if he were standing before an invisible jury, building a case for why his no deserved to be forgiven. The reply came back in under a minute. Totally understand. Thank you for everything you did last year. There was nothing in it that read as guilt or disappointment, just understanding. And yet, even after reading it, something in him didn't settle. His shoulders stayed tight, his stomach stayed knotted, and part of him kept waiting for the real response, the follow-up, the resentment he was certain must be coming. His mind knew the conversation was over. His body was still bracing for impact. And it never came. The rejection he had spent 15 minutes softening had been accepted in under 15 seconds. Michael realized later that the discomfort was never really about the fundraiser. It was about how deeply he learned to treat a simple boundary as something that required justification, apology, and proof. The other person had already moved on, but his nervous system hadn't. Over-explaining is doing two jobs at once. The first is preemptive defense. If you can explain before anyone can question you, then you never have to sit in the vulnerable gap between saying something and finding out how the other person reacts to it. So you skip the uncertainty by flooding it with information. The second is a worth strategy. So somewhere along the way, your value got tied to pleasing others. So an airtight explanation becomes proof that you aren't being difficult or selfish or letting someone down. If the reasoning holds up, then you get to keep believing you're a good person. Neither of these is a character flaw. Being considerate and thoughtful are real strengths that got recruited into a job they were never really meant to do, putting other people's needs and opinions above your own. And here's that callback. This pattern hits hardest with people whose opinion genuinely matters to you, because their reaction carries weight. A stranger's disappointment barely registers, while a boss's, a partner's, or a sibling's can kind of feel like a gut punch. Your nervous system is scanning for disapproval from the people whose acceptance you learn to treat as proof that you're doing life right. The fix isn't just caring less what people think. It's learning that their opinion of your decision doesn't have to change whether the decision was valid in the first place. So you've probably already figured out that you do this. Reading this isn't the hard part. Knowing it doesn't stop your hand from typing the third justifying sentence at 11 p.m. when you're declining something you had every right to decline in one line. That gap between knowing and doing isn't a failure of understanding. It's your subconscious, not your logic, running the show in the moment. Your body still treats an unexplained decision like a risk, so it reacts the way it always has, with a flood of reasons meant to protect you from a reaction that, most of the time, isn't even coming at all. Closing that gap doesn't just happen by understanding the pattern better, it also happens by practicing a different response while the old urge is still firing, until your body has new evidence to work from. So this isn't about becoming blunt or suddenly not caring how people feel, and it isn't just set a boundary advice, because you already know how to say the words. The work is in what happens in the 3 seconds after you say them. It looks like sending the text that just says, "I can't make it that weekend," and not adding a second sentence, even though your fingers want to so badly. It looks like noticing the urge to explain, feeling it fully, and then choosing not to follow it, even while the urge is still there. You aren't trying to stop having reasons. You're trying to stop needing those reasons to allow yourself to have needs. The goal isn't a version of you with no explanations left. It's a version of you who can let a decision stand without chasing someone else's approval of it. So here's something to practice this week. Pick one low-stakes situation, declining a small request or disagreeing with a minor plan, and say your answer in one sentence without adding because. Let the silence sit for a few seconds, even if it feels super uncomfortable. You're giving your nervous system a chance to tolerate a gap it usually rushes to fill. Then, next time you catch yourself stacking 3 reasons behind a simple no, pause before sending and notice where you feel it. A tight chest, a held breath, whatever it is for you. Ask yourself one question. Am I explaining this because they need to understand, or because part of me doesn't feel allowed to say no without having an external reason? You don't have to change the message, just notice the answer. That noticing is where the shift starts. You're allowed to make a decision that nobody has to be talked into. You're allowed to say no without a supporting argument attached. Part of you still believes an unexplained choice is a risk, and that part has been doing its job for a long time. It just doesn't need to run the whole show anymore. So here's the one thing I'll leave you with. Stop asking yourself why you do this. Ask instead, what did I learn about my worth and my ability to have needs that makes all of this feel necessary? This pattern didn't come out of nowhere. It makes sense when you see what built it, and once you can see what built it, you can start building something different in its place. The goal is to start trusting the validity of your own decisions, regardless of other people's reactions. Now, if this is a pattern you recognize in yourself, it's one I talk about a lot in my book, Unpacked: How to Detach from the Subconscious Beliefs That Are Sabotaging Your Life. You can download the free first chapter using the link in the description if you want to keep exploring this, particularly the parts about self-worth and where these rules first got written. No pressure either way. If you want to sit with this one on your own first, drop a comment about where over-explaining shows up for you. I read everyone.